What's the difference between I told you before and I told you earlier? It's a really interesting question. Like a lot of things in English, it looks like they are similar. And therefore, when things are similar in English, they tend to be confusing. So let's have a look at this. I told you before, or I told you earlier. So there are a lot of similarities here, right? We have the same subject, we have the same verb in past tense, and we have the same object. So it's a very simple sentence. But then we have this. And what are these? Well, earlier is an adverb. Okay? Before can be an adverb, but it often is also a preposition. And we know from previous live streams that prepositions always come before nouns. That's their job, to connect the noun. In fact, the word preposition means before, position. So before the noun position. So what we have here are two sentences that are very similar, but there are some slight differences, and that's what I want to make sure we understand. When we say I told you before, we really need a noun here. Before what? Right? Now, oftentimes in a conversation, I don't need to say before what because the listener knows already. Okay, so if I told this person something, when I was young, my mother would remind me to tie my shoes. And she would say, I told you before, tie your shoes. So before what? Well, before this time, before this moment, before now. That's what she meant. Before, in the past, before everything, right? So, but I remember that because it's in my memory. I remember her telling me to tie my shoes before. So I'm clear about what she means. She means before now. So we don't have to say the word if the other person understands the word, right? So this can be implied. It's a noun implied. So before now, before today, right? It could also be specific, like I told you before Monday to join my live stream. I told you before Monday. And if you know that I'm talking about Monday, I don't need to say it. Let's look at this one. I told you earlier. Earlier than what? Now, if we look closely, earlier is a comparative adjective as well as an adverb. Earlier than something else, right? In a previous episode, we talked about comparatives, and we talked about how adjectives can compare, right? This bunny is big, this bunny is small. So we can say this bunny is bigger than this one, or this bunny is smaller than this one. That er suffix creates a comparative. Earlier is a comparative adjective, right? Now, we don't have a noun to describe. So in this structure, it's acting as an adverb, telling us when you did this action. But in its core, it's a comparative adjective. Before is not. We don't compare with the word before, right? I don't say, I told you before then something. Earlier is a comparative. So what we're saying here, what we're meaning is, I told you earlier than another time. And typically it means now. I told you earlier than now to tie your shoes. So this is implying a comparative, right? And usually it means short time. Okay? A short time in the past. Earlier than now, but not distant past. This could be distant past. I told you before 2005. Right? We could imply that year, or we could say it, but this could be the distant past. Right? I told you before you graduated high school, Paul. Well, that was a long time ago. Right? I told you before the show started, right? Before a specific moment, and there's no limit. So I told you before could refer to a distant past point. I told you before you started high school that you should tie your shoes, okay? Earlier, we tend to use when we mean a short time in the past, like today. Earlier than now, not before high school. If I'm talking about the distant past, I would use this, right? And give it a specific time. So that's the big difference. I told you before, a specific time. I told you earlier, compared to what? Compared to now. So usually the same day, we could use earlier. Oh, I told you earlier that the live stream started at 4, not 5. I told you that about 10 minutes ago. Okay, so use this one for a short time in the past, usually the same day, and use this one for a longer time in the past. And you can indicate the past. Okay? Jessica, I hope that clarifies. That's a very good question. Let's see if anyone else has joined us. We have Jonas. "5 p.m. Pacific." Actually, okay, the grammar we'll talk about, but I hope you don't mean it's now 5 p.m. Pacific, because right now it is 4:20 Pacific. And by the way, Jonas, Pacific is the adjective version referring to the ocean. Not peaceful, passive. That's not what it means. It means Pacific Ocean. I'm on the west coast of Canada. So if you're familiar with North America, down below you have Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver. We're on the west coast, on the Pacific coast. So when we say it is 5 p.m. Pacific, we are implying the noun time. It is 5 p.m. Pacific. That's an adjective. Time, which is a noun. Pacific time. But if I say 5 p.m., obviously we're talking about time. So we can drop that word. This makes it very obvious, right? So this is modifying the time, but that word is missing, so it kind of turns around and modifies that. We might call that a post-nominal adjective. It's describing the previous noun, but in an indirect way, because it's actually meant to, it's modifying an implied noun, okay? So in answer to this question, it's actually not after the noun. It's actually modifying a missing noun, an implied noun, Pacific time. Time's a noun. But we know that we're talking about time because we have the number right here, 5 p.m. That's clearly a time. So to cut out some repetition, we can drop the word time, but the adjective Pacific is still in place. Now, this is a good question, Jonas. We can't really substitute these two words directly. Already is an adverb, okay? But it's typically used with present perfect, right? Because it implies that something has happened in the past, let's say in a timeline, and it's something that happened in the past that affects the present, but which was expected, right? So your parents or your partner might say, "Hey, have you finished your homework already? I'm expecting you to finish the homework, but I don't know when, and I'm not pointing to a specific time." This is really past tense, simple past tense, which really needs a specific time, right? I told you before a specific time. Already doesn't need a specific time, but it's typically used with present perfect. Now, I say typically because some people will use it with simple past. It's just not a really clean use of that word. Okay, I'm going to clear the board and go to the next question. I love the follow-up questions you guys ask, because often when I'm breaking something down on the board, I'm speaking and writing, and sometimes I forget a little piece. So please never hesitate to challenge me on something that you don't understand, or that maybe you think I haven't explained fully, or that you sense a contradiction in something I say. That's fine too. We're all here to learn. I'm here to help you guys learn. I'm not here to force you to memorize what I'm saying or to follow everything I'm saying. We're exploring and we're investigating. Okay, let's go to our next question. Here we go. So this is an interesting question. What's the difference between that and which? And how do I use them? Okay? Very good question. Now, that and which are used in a very special way. And they're used in a lot of ways, but the number one way they're used is as relative pronouns. So let's explore that. What's a relative pronoun? Well, in order to understand what a relative pronoun, we need to understand what something called a relative clause is. Okay? And this is a very important piece of English grammar. It's very, very commonly used, so it's useful to understand it. Relative clauses are very powerful in order to describe something. I prefer to call relative clauses adjective clauses, and I'll show you why. First, let's review what a clause is. I think I have a marker here. So a clause is a subject plus a verb, and it's a complete idea. Must have a subject, must have a verb, and it must be a complete idea. Now, it doesn't have to be a rich, full, complex idea, but it must be understandable and complete. It could be small. It could be a small clause like, I jog, right? It's my hobby. I jog in the park. I run, I jog. Subject, verb. It's all I need. And it's a complete idea. Hey, Paul, what's your hobby? Oh, I jog. That's a complete idea, okay? That's a clause. So what's an adjective clause? An adjective clause is a clause that acts or functions as an adjective. And you guys know what adjectives do. Adjectives describe nouns. Just like that. So let me give you an example. I'm just going to use past tense. Sometimes I really prefer past tense. Okay, so there is a simple clause. So this is the clause, right? You see that? Yep. We have a subject. We have a verb. We even have an object. You don't always need an object. You could have an adjective here. Now, is that a complete idea? How do you know? Here's a little thought experiment I often like to use. It's called the bus stop test. Imagine walking up to a stranger at a bus stop and saying that to them. Nothing else, just that. Would they understand you with no context? Go up to the bus stop. There's an old woman sitting on the bench waiting for the bus. Oh, excuse me, madam. Paul ate the pizza. Now, she doesn't know why you're telling her, but she'll understand the idea. She'll form a clear picture in her mind. Oh, Paul ate the pizza. She'll have questions like, who's Paul? Why did he eat the pizza? And why should I care? But she'll understand the idea. It's a subject and a verb, and it's a complete idea, so it's a clause. Now, Paul ate the pizza doesn't tell us much. It's a complete idea, but it's a simple idea, right? The great thing about adjectives is we could put an adjective here, something like big. Paul ate the big pizza, right? And that tells us more information about the pizza. But it doesn't tell us about actions to describe the pizza. And that's the beauty of an adjective clause. It has a verb in it. So it can tell us about the pizza's actions. It can tell us what it does, for example. I have a toy moose, very common animal in Canada. Not in the city where I live, but out in the mountains, yeah, you can see a moose. Huge animal, like a dinosaur. Anyway, here's a toy moose. I could say, Paul has the moose in his hand. Okay, it's a toy moose. That describes it. It's a brown moose. But we can also talk about what the moose does, because this has the ability to do actions. For example, it can move. And if you want to describe movement, you need verbs. Now, pizzas don't tend to move, but we can use verbs. So how do we describe this? We're going to use an adjective clause. Okay, we need a subject and a verb. Let's say I want to tell you about the pizza. Well, I have a friend who has a pizza oven that you put fire in there and you can put your pizza in it. He's got it in his backyard. It's fantastic. Sometimes he makes pizza and I'm happy to eat it. Okay, my friend is a chef. He makes delicious pizza. I like to eat it. So, what do we have here? We have a clause. His friend made. And it's describing the pizza. Which pizza? Paul ate the pizza. Which pizza? Well, it was big, yes, but it's the pizza his friend made. And this is a clause, and this is a clause, but they're two separate ideas. And this one doesn't seem complete, right? We can't walk up to the woman at the bus stop and say this and have her understand. Excuse me, madam, his friend made. It's not going to be clear, right? It needs some more information. In fact, we don't want this to be alone. We want to connect it to this. Why? Because this clause, right, is going to act as an adjective and describe pizza. So it has to be close to the word it's describing, pizza, just like big is right before it, and we need to connect it. We connect it with relative pronouns. Relative pronouns. Now, what kind of noun is pizza? Well, it's not a person, it's not a place, it's a thing. So if you're connecting an adjective clause to a noun and it's a thing, you have two choices. That and which. Okay? That and which. Paul ate the pizza. Which pizza? The pizza that his friend made. Now there's a lot of little complex rules about this. One of them is, if you're talking about a specific pizza with the word the pizza, you should use that. If it's not specific, just let's say it's my habit. Paul eats pizza. Well, then which is fine? In fact, both are fine. In fact, the relative pronoun can sometimes act as a subject in the clause, the adjective clause. For example, if we had something like here we have a subject, so we kind of don't need this. And in fact, you can cut that. You could say, Paul eats pizza his friend made, or Paul ate the pizza his friend made. Because we have a subject, so we don't need this to be the subject. But what if this clause had no subject? Paul eats pizza tastes spicy. So now we have an adjective here, and we have a verb. We no longer have a subject. Now we absolutely need one of the relative pronouns to be the subject. Paul eats pizza that tastes spicy. Paul eats pizza which tastes spicy. We have to have a relative pronoun because this clause has no subject. This clause has a subject, so we are allowed to drop that. And in speech, we tend to. Okay? Now, this is an adjective clause for inanimate objects, non-human, non-living objects. But what if we are talking about something else, like just going to clear this, make a little space. Okay, let's look at this. Paul has a friend. Again, we have the subject, we have a different verb, and we have a different object. What kind of friend? Well, I told you I have a friend, and my friend makes pizza. Now, I could have two sentences. I could say, I have a friend, period. My friend makes pizza. It's boring. The adjective clause lets us connect in a way that describes the friend. Now, friend is not an inhuman object like a pizza. Friend is a person. So for the person, if we're describing a person and what the person does, the action the person does, we need a relative pronoun because here we have a verb but we have no subject. So we need a relative pronoun and we have two to choose from. We can say that or who, sorry. Paul has a friend that makes pizza. Paul has a friend who makes pizza. Now we must have this because now this is acting as the subject for that verb. So we have no choice but to keep it. Remember, you can only drop the relative pronoun, delete it, if you have a subject next, right? Because the clause needs a subject and a verb. Subject, verb. Subject, verb. Okay? Now, Paul has a friend that or who makes pizza. Both are fine. But if you ask me, I think it's a little more polite to call humans who, to connect the adjective clause using who. Paul has a friend who makes pizza. Why? Because they're human. And using that choice distinguishes the connector, the relative pronoun, from the object style. You're allowed to say that. It's perfectly grammatical. I just don't think it's the best choice. You have a choice, but think about the choice you make. Now, what if we don't have an object? What if we don't have a person? What if we have a place? Paul lives in Vancouver. Now, Vancouver is the name of my city, right? A city is not a who. A city is not an object. It's a place. And let's say Paul lives in Vancouver, where he live streams. Live streams is a verb. And we have no subject, so we definitely need a relative pronoun. Paul lives in Vancouver, that live streams. Actually, no, let's put the he live streams. So let's give it a subject. Paul lives in Vancouver, that he live streams. No. Paul lives in Vancouver, which he live streams. No, because he doesn't live stream Vancouver. He live streams from Vancouver or in Vancouver. Or we can use another relative pronoun. We can use the question word where he live streams. Because that connects our adjective clause to a place. Okay, now there's a more formal way to do this. We could say Paul lives in Vancouver, from where he live streams. Or we could even say which, from which he live streams. Or we can say Paul lives in Vancouver, which he live streams from. Okay, that's possible. But in answer to the original question, that or which, use that or which, you have a choice, when you're connecting to a non-animate object, noun. Use that or who when you're connecting an adjective clause to a person, right? Basically, anything else can use which. I think that covers it, right? Which. Now, which is often used with prepositions, right? Paul lives in Vancouver, from which, or in which he teaches or he live streams, or which he live streams in, or which he teaches in. It's a little bit awkward, but it can be done. Now up here, remember this rule. If you have a subject in the adjective clause, you're allowed to drop the relative pronoun. But if the next word is a verb and there is no other subject, you have to keep it. Okay? Now, let's go back to the first one because this is the most common. Paul eats pizza, which his friend made. Or Paul ate the pizza. Well, let's use simple present. Paul eats pizza which his friend makes. Okay, quite often. Now, if this information is essential, like when we had the, Paul eats the pizza, which pizza? You need to know which one. You have to use that. That is used for defining information. Right? If I ask you, hey, give me the book, you're going to ask which book you're talking about, which specific book. Give me the book. The adjective clause that comes after should be that. Give me the book that I mentioned. Give me the book that I assigned for reading. Okay? But if it's just extra information, Paul eats pizza. Any pizza. Right? Which is probably a better choice. Right? Which his friend makes, because it's just extra information. And that's the difference between that and which. Okay, Jonas says, that's the point, teacher. We're trying to get as many tips. Tips is plural, so we should say many tips. Good, I'm glad you're learning, Jonas. That's the key. I appreciate that. This is a good question. When you're building adjectives from words that may not be adjectives, like friend, noun, made, verb, and they're both working together to describe the noun pizza. So friend made pizza becomes an adjective. Yeah, you need a dash. You see this very often, like well researched concept. Concept is a noun. Well, right, is an adverb. Researched is a past tense verb. If you put them together as a hyphen, they become an adjective structure describing the noun. Yeah, homemade. Homemade pizza or real world objects. Exactly. Because homemade becomes an adjective to pizza, but home is not an adjective, and made is a verb. So they're not adjectives, but when you hyphenate them, they take on the meaning of an adjective structure. What kind of pizza? Pizza that is homemade, right? So that's like taking the adjective clause and putting it in front of the noun. You have to hyphenate. And, trust me, a lot of people don't, even in print. Oh, I want to say hello to Zelkarnin, who's just joining us. Hi, Zelkarnin. Hope you're doing well. And if you'll allow me a moment, I'll spray the board again and get ready for the next question. We're going to try to go a little quickly here because there's a lot of information to cover. A lot of questions lined up. If you guys have questions during the week, please contact me on social media. And that's one more reason I've created a platform. The website and community platform, the Hard-Boiled English Workshop, so that you can put all your questions in one place during the week, and I know where to find them, and I can address them on the live stream. So this platform is going to help me a lot, and I hope it provides a lot of value and fun for you guys, because you won't have to look everywhere to find me. You'll find me at hardboiledenglish.com. So starting January 1st, this is the only place for this live stream. Every week, it will stream into the platform, so you have to be signed in to watch it. And again, there are free membership plans that will allow that, but I need you to sign into the platform because that is the only place where you will find all of my stuff, including this live show. And the new live stream, which will be coming in January. Okay. Past perfect and simple past. Okay, we can talk about that. I see Jack. Teacher Jack is with us. Hi, Jack. Hopefully you're doing well these days. And guys, if you haven't checked it out, go to the A to Z English podcast. Jack, feel free to put the link in the chat thread. Jonas says, the question salad. Don't worry, please. Your questions are great. They're always welcome. Okay, let me just clear this graphic. And we'll get to the next question. Cheers to you too, Jack. Hope everything's going well. How's our time? Okay. Where are we? Okay, let me answer your question, Wilson, about past perfect. So past perfect is often misunderstood and therefore misused, because with understanding comes your ability to use it accurately. And that's the goal of grammar, to use it to express your meanings, right? So The goal of grammar isn't to pass a bunch of quizzes and use correct or incorrect grammar. Correctness has nothing to do with it. The goal of grammar is to have control over it, like a puppeteer. So you can control the grammar and make it express what you want with precision. Past perfect and simple past are often mixed up, and they're different. So let's take a look at that. Now, first thing, I will put a timeline down here. So we're talking about the past, the present, and the future. Because past perfect and simple past are verb tenses, and they communicate ideas about the time. Okay? So let's review simple past first. I ate the pizza yesterday. When we use simple past, we need to know when that action happened. Simple past is an expression that in the past, at this time, that happened. Okay? In this case, yesterday. Okay, now when we say specific time, it doesn't have to be like 3:46 p.m. yesterday. It could be yesterday. But as you can see, yesterday means it started and finished because today we're on today. Today is Friday. So this is a complete time in the past. That's what qualifies it as specific. It started and ended. So for example, we can use a whole clause like, when I was a child. When I was a child. Well, that started and it has finished. So that's totally in the past. So we consider that a specific time in the past. When you use simple past, you need to be pointing to a specific time. You either have to say it, or the listener or reader has to already understand it. They need to know what point you're talking about. Otherwise, this makes no sense. If you just walk up to someone at a bus stop and say, I ate the pizza, the first thing they're going to want to know is, oh, really? When? They know it's in the past, but they don't know when. So, simple past needs a time. Past perfect doesn't express this. It expresses a different idea. Let me just change this a little bit. In English, perfect doesn't mean what it means. Sorry, in English grammar, the word perfect doesn't mean what it usually means in normal conversation. It doesn't mean beautiful or awesome. In grammar, perfect means complete, finished. And if something is complete and finished, it's in the past. It could be like 2 seconds in the past. But once something is done, it must be in the past. So, perfect really means past. And that's true for present perfect, right? Present perfect grammar means an action in the past affects the present. So that's like saying the past affects the present. Present perfect. So this is an important idea to understand. Perfect, and I don't really know why we chose that word, but it means past. So, what does past perfect mean? It means past past. Past perfect. And if perfect means past, like I said here, perfect equals past, then this grammar that we call past perfect really means past past, 2 pasts. And that tells us how to use it. How do we use it? Well, you use it when you're talking about 2 actions in the past. 2 pasts, right? past, past. And one happened before the other. Let's say Monday. That is the only time we use past perfect. The only time you need to use it is when you have two actions in the past and we need to know which one happened first. And the one that happened first is always past perfect, even if you say it secondly in the sentence. So for example, I ate the pizza yesterday, but something else happened before it, right? Let's say I studied. I studied English. Okay, I studied English. That's the first action. So let's say Monday I studied. And yesterday I ate the pizza. Now we know which one happened first. So let's make a past perfect sentence. Now the example might be kind of goofy. I'm always using pizza, and study seems a little bit unrelated, but that's beside the point. The point is the sequence. So let's say we're going to combine them in a sentence, and it doesn't matter which order you put it in the sentence. The past perfect grammar is always first. So we could say, I had studied when I ate the pizza. So here's past perfect. Remember what it means. It means past, past. So that means both verbs, the helping verb and the main verb, are in past form. Had studied when I ate the pizza. Right? So I had studied when I ate the pizza. So we're focusing the idea on the first action. When I ate the pizza. At that moment, what was true? It was true that I had studied. And it's the first action. But we could also switch this around, and it still has the same meaning. We could say, when I ate the pizza, comma, I had studied. Which action happened first? It's always the one in past perfect, because what does it mean? It means past, past. Okay? Now, Wilson is asking about using when and after. So we have this word when. When I ate the pizza. And the word when is an interesting word. It's sometimes used as a question like, when will you arrive? But here it's not doing that. What it's doing is it's marking the moment that we're focused on, that we're thinking about. So if this is a little movie, we're looking at this moment, not this moment. So it's like a camera. What's your camera looking at? It's looking at the moment when you say when. When I ate the pizza, what was true? It was true that I had studied. And again, this clause could be the second in the sentence. It could be the first. It doesn't matter. When I ate the pizza, I had studied. Okay? Past perfect is over here now. Simple past is first. It's still describing the same sequence. The past perfect is always the one that happened in reality in our life first. It doesn't matter if it's the second in the sentence. It's still the first action that we're talking about. That's what's great about past perfect. The sentence order can be switched and the meaning is still clear. Past perfect tells us which action happened first. That's its only function. Now, I had studied. If I put the word before here, interesting things happen. Or let's try, I ate the pizza after I had studied. Now I just told you that the only reason we use past perfect is to tell us which of two actions or more happened first. But if we use before and after, those words tell us which action happened first. So we don't need past perfect anymore. We can switch to simple past because before and after make the sequence clear. Clearly this is before and clearly this is after. So these two words have a kind of magic power when you have two actions. So it fits my philosophy in English, which is one word is better than two and two words is better than three. If you can get rid of a word, you should do it. So if before and after already tell us the sequence clearly, we don't need past perfect. So we can go back to simple past. I studied before I ate the pizza. I ate the pizza after I studied. Is the sequence clear? Yes. Clearly the studying happened first. Right? That's past perfect. That is past perfect. Here's an example. Before I took the test, I had prepared well. Yeah, that's past perfect. And you can switch these around. You can say, I had prepared well before I took the test. Same meaning. It still organizes the events. Now, Jonas, you're using the magic powerful word before. So actually, you no longer need past perfect. You can use it, but it's a little bit redundant now because clearly this word tells us which happened first. It tells us prepared happened first. And if that's telling us that, we don't need past perfect to indicate the first action anymore. So you could say, before I took the test, I prepared well. You can drop the had, right? We don't need 10 words doing the same function. We just need one word. If the word before makes the sequence clear, we don't need past perfect. We really don't. We only need past perfect in order to make the sequence clear, which one happened first in the past. But if you use before and after, those words make it clear, right? We don't like redundancy in English. We don't want extra words we don't need. We don't want extra structures polluting our speech that we don't need. We want to be concise. Now that's English. Other languages may not feel the same way, right? But English, language, comes from Britain. It comes from a specific culture. And if you know anything about British people, they tend to be a little reserved. If they don't need to say it or express it, they don't. Think about James Bond. He doesn't say a million words for a simple idea. He says only what he needs to. James Bond is a British character. Now, I'm North American and we tend to speak more perhaps than British people do, but it's still English. English is evolved to be concise. Okay, so if you don't need a word, cut it. And if you use before or after, you do not need past perfect. So cut it. Use past perfect when you don't use before and after. So I would summarize like this. Use past perfect or use before and after with simple past. Yeah, I had prepared well for the last test. That's fine, but you're missing the second action, right? So it's a little bit awkward. I had prepared well for the last test. It's implying a second action, but you're not actually saying it. So the listener would have to know that you took or you wrote the last test. So you don't need past perfect here. You could just say, I prepared well for the last test, because there's only one action. If you have one action, simple past. Yeah, it's a concise language. Now, Wilson's with us, and Wilson is a Spanish speaker. And my understanding of languages like Spanish or Portuguese is they favor the opposite of concision, which is verbosity, lots of language, lots of expression, lots of words. English isn't like that. And that's another reason why the languages don't necessarily translate directly, right? Here we go. By the time I arrived home at 7 p.m. last night, I had already finished my homework at the library. That's great, right? You're not using before and after, so we need past perfect. Had already finished. So the focus of the sentence, the main idea is, I arrived home. That's what we're looking at in our camera. That's what we're thinking about. What was true at that moment? This was true. This had already happened. By the way, that's a good use of already, right? Earlier I said that it's typically used with present perfect. Indeed, it's also used with past perfect. So that's a good use. But you don't need it. It just creates emphasis. Okay. Now, guys, I do have some more questions to go to, but I'm kind of running out of time here. So I think I will save the questions for next week. One of the questions I have was asked of me by Jessica, I think. So I apologize, Jessica, that I'm not going to talk about this topic tonight because it requires at least an hour. So if you give me a little patience, next week we'll discuss this topic in detail. And her topic is related to possessives. Possessives are a big topic. So I'll talk about that next week. I promise. But I want to make sure that we go into detail with that. And detail requires time. So I will say goodnight in a moment, guys. But just a reminder, because I'm slowly working towards this in January. In January, if you want to watch the show, you have to go and sign up to the platform, the new website, hardboiledenglish.com. That's where you will find all of my stuff as of January 1st, 2024. I'm going to keep reminding everyone so we can slowly start moving over there. But after January, no more YouTube. I am leaving YouTube. And the show will continue, but it will be on my own platform. And there is a messaging system there. There is a chat room. So we can do everything together in one place. My online courses will be there. Downloadable documents and resources will be there. Everything in one spot. So please go to hardboiledenglish.com. Sign up. There are different plans, including the free plan, the free community plan. But get over there, get involved. Try the chat function. Give me some questions or hellos. And we'll start working together there in January. And during December and early January, I'll be away. So the show will stop running for 3 weeks, I think. But we'll come back to the new platform. Okay, I'm going to say goodnight, everyone. Thank you, Jack. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Wilson. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, thank you for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure. Hopefully, we answered the questions that were asked. There's never enough time. I think I had 5 questions listed tonight, but just never enough time for everything. So I'm going to answer that question about possessives next week. So next week is the possessive show, right? So I'm going to say good night. I want you guys all to take care of yourselves. Stay healthy in the meantime. Yes, I think it's actually 4 weeks, but I think the show will come back after 3 weeks. I'm visiting Japan, so I won't be able to live stream from there. But I'll be with you next week. Okay, guys, I will say good night. Thank you for joining me. Until the next time I see you, please keep studying. Please keep asking questions about grammar. Stay healthy,